Welcome back to our study called Favor and Hatred. Today we're looking at verses 1 through 4, and I've entitled this Introducing Joseph, because we finally get to know this guy. We've heard about his birth. We've heard about, Rachel and her travails through childbirth, and now we finally get to see who this guy ends up being. So let's start with the first part, verse 1. And we see, really, verse 1 is a bridge between the previous chapter, the Book of Edom, and then the Book of Jacob here. It simply states that Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. Jacob, like Isaac and Abraham before him, sojourned in the land. He did not live as though he owned the land, even though God had already promised to him the land. God already told him, this is your land. As the book of Hebrews tells us, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all lived in the land as if they were living in a foreign country, even though it was their homeland. They would call it their homeland, but they always lived as if they were foreigners there. They all lived like that because they acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. Like they didn't belong on the earth, is what they're saying. Remember that they desired a better country. That's what the book of Hebrews tells us, that they were desiring a better country, a heavenly one. So they understood. They understood some of what was going on, and that there's an afterlife, that the physical land was not the soul, was not the whole promise of God. Like there was much more beyond just that plot of land over there in the Middle East. That's not exactly what they were waiting for. And that does kind of have to play into your eschatology. I think some views of eschatology don't put that chapter of Hebrews 11, they don't put much into that. The fact that they weren't looking for the land. They could have been in the land. They were in the land of promise. But they lived as foreigners there. They were never really truly in possession of the land. And then God says later on, you can go ahead and take possession, but they don't. And they never do. And that's because of their faithlessness. But we need to remember that. And they were looking forward to, as the book of Hebrews tells us, they were looking forward to a city prepared for them. Not one that they had to build, but one that was prepared already for them. A city from God himself, built by his own hands. Remember the words of Jesus to his disciples. I go to prepare a place for you. Makes sense to me. That's what they were waiting for. They weren't waiting for themselves to do something. They were waiting for Christ to build the home for them. And that's exactly what he did. Now I move on to verses 2 through 4. And we get the coat of jealousy here. Now, 2 through 4, we get some introductory notes on Joseph. So far, we know that he was a son of Rachel, and Rachel gave birth to him when they were in Padan Aram, and he was her firstborn. And Rachel would die in childbirth with Joseph's full brother, Benjamin, and there was only those two that came from Rachel. All the rest of his brothers are only half brothers, and so they're only half related, only through Jacob. Everybody else, except for Benjamin, is only half his brother. And he also has a half-sister named Dinah. We've already gone through that story. She's a little bit older than him. And we already know that whole thing, that whole debacle. And now we've have Joseph as a young man of 17. So some time has passed since the last story that we talked about. It's been 17 years at least since they left Padan Aram. So we know that for a fact because he is now 17. He was born in Padan Aram in Laban's household. They left. They went to Shechem. He went to Bethel. And so all of this within 17 years, which is a long time. It's a long time. You can move around a lot in that space of time. And he and his brothers had picked up the family business from their father, and they oversaw large flocks of animals of the household. Now, we are not told in scripture what his brothers were doing, but Joseph brought back a bad report of them to Jacob. So whatever they were doing, we don't know, but he brought back a bad report and said, your sons are doing this. This would be the beginning of a division that would continue to grow. Now, the division was caused not only by Joseph, right, who brought a bad report, but Jacob favored Joseph over his other sons, over all his sons. And Moses says that Israel loved Joseph more. Here is one of those examples of Moses using the name of Israel to refer to Jacob. It's pretty interesting that he uses it here in reference to the love of Joseph and the love that Jacob had for Joseph. Perhaps there's some foreshadowing there. You know, Jacob displayed his favoritism by giving Joseph the infamous coat of many colors. You know, you think about the idea of the favoritism, of the preference of Joseph. You see that there is some foreshadowing there, even with the tribe of Joseph. You have Manasseh and Ephraim. You know, Ephraim would become the largest tribe and would also become, you know, the one that would really represent the northern tribes. And if you read the prophets, oftentimes the nation of Israel, the northern part of Israel, was referred to as Ephraim, which is one of Joseph's sons. And so you kind of see this preference, this kind of, you know, priority, this preeminence here with Joseph and his sons. And so it's pretty interesting that, you know, here we have Israel loving Joseph. But Joseph gets the coat of many colors, you know, the infamous coat. And it could also be a robe with long sleeves. We're not sure how it should be read. So it could be a coat with lots of colors on it. It could be just a normal coat, but with long sleeves. But at any rate, it's a sign of Joseph's higher status in the family. And it was not a robe that you would go out to wear, you know, watching sheep. You wouldn't be out there in the field wearing this kind of robe. And so you weren't out meant to be doing the menial labor. So that's another reason why his brothers were upset, because they're out there in the fields. He's back at home. He'd be the keeper of tents, kind of like what Jacob was when he was growing up. You know, Esau was the one out in the fields running around crazy, and Jacob would stay near the tents. And he was happy with that. He was happy to be a businessman and not to be the one who was the actual person with the animals. But he had to do that anyway because of Laban, but he probably would have preferred to do that since that's what he chose to do as a young man. So, or not so young, he was like 7 years old when he left the household. So, but anyway, so his brothers saw that he was more loved by their father than him, and so they hated him and could not say anything nice to him. They couldn't stand his face, basically. And so they left, you know, they took the animals and went away. So Jacob's love of Rachel here really, you know, that same love that drove Leah to jealousy, it's the same, you know, kind of thing here he's got going on with his sons. You know, Jacob loved Rachel more than his other wives, and so they were jealous. At least Leah was jealous. And you have Jacob loving Joseph, and so his brothers are jealous. And so it happens again. He didn't learn with his wives that he shouldn't be doing that, you know. If you got this family, you got to treat them, you know, in a different way. You can't be like showing favors all the time. And you got to learn to love your other children. Not just set all of your love upon one, and then the other ones are kind of, you know, somewhere in there. Jacob didn't learn that, so. But that's that first section of the story so far. So we kind of know a little bit more about Joseph. He's 17. He's got this coat now. He's been shown preferential treatment by his father. His brothers are angry with him, and they're living in the land of Canaan. So next time, we'll take a look at verses 5 through 11, and we'll look at the dreams that Joseph has.